Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm Sal, here with my co-host Monty. What's going on, Monty?
What's going on, Sal? We're back from a big episode last week. Thank you, everybody, for oh my God, you guys blew that video up.
I know. We really appreciate all you guys and what you did. Um, and I'm glad you guys liked the format of how we rolled out the episode. It sounds like something that people enjoyed. So we'll be doing that again with this episode with the live premiere. Hopefully loading, I think at noon again tomorrow,
Yep.
noon on Friday. So when you guys are watching this, hopefully it'll be at noon. Um, I don't know why I'm telling you that. You're probably watching it live right now. But we were recording a little late, so apologize. No, thank you guys for all the support. We were hoping for maybe a little bit better than our usual viewership. We did not expect where we got to. Thanks to all you guys. We're pushing well over 6,000 views at this point, which is insane.
I
Yeah, and
can't
our
believe it.
yeah, we couldn't believe what happened, and our subscribers went up. So all of you guys who helped us out, everybody who viewed in, um, and I just want to shout out some people. Mason, you definitely helped us out a little bit early on. We appreciate you hooking us up with spreading the word, as did many others on all our friends on Giants Twitter. Authentic, appreciate you having me on your show yesterday. I think that also helped. We love talking about this stuff, and we really appreciate you guys. And we hope to keep bringing you good stuff. But no, that's all I got to say. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy this episode too. Just to recap, last week we kind of skipped a lot of the Giants talk. I think we're going to do the same thing because we're going to jump right into the quarterback part 2 episode. Last week we did quarterbacks 1 through 5, and for those who've watched it, hopefully all of you, there was a specific format we followed. We went through various stats that we used to try to stratify these players. In addition to a lot of the game film that Monty and I reviewed, we did the same thing. We reviewed anywhere from 3 to 4 coaches' film games for these players going back at least 1 to 2 years. So we try to get a good feel for them on tape. We try to put that together with the data. Our top 5 from last week as a recap: number 1 was Caleb Williams. Number 2 was Drake May. Number 3 was Shedeur Sanders. Number 4 was J.J. McCarthy. And number 5 was Michael Penix Jr. And as we have mentioned before, this is a strong class. It's not 5 deep. It's probably more like 15 deep in terms of quality players who have some sort of role and value in the NFL, potentially draftable players. We're going to stick with 10. So we're going to do quarterback 6 through 10 here. And this is our own personal rankings. I know there's going to be differences in how some other people do this. But before we get into it, I just want to recap some of the stats that we're going to be going through, just so you guys are re-familiar with it. We're going to talk about things like expected completion percentage and completion percentage. Again, adjusted completion percentage is the completion percentage with confounders such as thrown away passes, balls that are hit at the line, quarterbacks taking a hit, spike balls taken out of the mix to try to really gauge accuracy of the quarterback. We're going to be talking about stats like pressure to sack rate and time to throw. These try to measure how long the quarterback holds onto the ball and how good they are at getting rid of the ball when they're under pressure and avoiding sacks. And some baseline numbers for all those stats to remember for adjusted completion percentage in the NFL. When you're not under pressure, it's around 73%. When you are under pressure, it's around 63%. So we're looking for something like that. For the pressure to sack rate, we're looking for a number of about 20%ish or less. And for time to throw, generally 3 seconds or less in the college game. We wanted a little bit closer to 2.7 seconds or lower in the NFL game. That's just a quick rundown of the things to be aware of in terms of stats. But before we get into this, to the rest of these quarterbacks, Monty, do you have any other thoughts you want to share with our friends here?
I just wanted to, recap our quarterbacks from last episode as we go into 6 through 10 here. So just a reminder, last week we had number 1, Caleb Williams, number 2, Drake May, number 3, Shedeur Sanders, number 4, J.J. McCarthy, and number 5, Michael Penix Jr. So those were our top 5, and we're going to go ahead and dive into our top 6 here. Do you have anything else before we do that, Sal?
No, let's get into these guys. Oh, one thing I'll say. before we get in, the top, we will say right here that other than maybe the top guy that we're going to mention here, there is definitely a difference between the top five and the next five, and we'll
Agreed.
explain our differences. And we both saw it on their film, and I think there is definitely a little bit of a tear drop off here. That said, these are still good players, and they fit the NFL, and many of them are starting caliber players in the NFL. But I don't think they're necessarily quite at the level of our top tier guys. Um, no, but I think that's kind of all I wanted to say as we go into this. Um, and if you're ready, let's roll with quarterback six.
Yep. Let's go ahead and get into it. So I'll pull it up and you can introduce it.
All right, so our QB six. This is going to be controversial because I've heard him referred to as high as QB3 in this upcoming class. It's a big
Yep.
controversy, but QB6 for us, Jayden Daniels from LSU. He is 6'4", 210 pounds. He's a fifth-year player. He was a four-star recruit. In 2018, he was in the Elite 11. He was a finalist. He started his career at Arizona State and transferred for the last couple of years at LSU. He has some incredible records that are worthy of sharing. He's the first player in FBS history to rush for over 200 plus yards and pass for 350 plus yards in the same game. He did that a week or so ago. He's the only player in FBS history with 12,000 total passing yards and 3,000 total rushing yards. Insane numbers. He set the SEC record with 606 total yards, 234 passing, and 372 rushing in the win over Florida. And then that's just recently. In 2022, he had some solid numbers as well. I'll just rip through them very quickly. He had a 68.6% completion percentage, 2,913 passing yards, 17 passing touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. He rushed for an additional 885 yards with 11 rushing touchdowns. He did fumble the ball 4 times, but that's actually not a bad number if you remember. That's actually relatively low for some of these guys. He had an 87.8 overall PFF grade, a 79.1 passing grade, an 81.4 rushing grade, a 62.4 grade under pressure, which is a very good score. 69.1 of that was from running, and I think that's worthy of our discussion. And he had an 85.1 PFF grade beyond the first read, which is 9th best in college football. So those are some of the basics. And then just like last time, we're going to dive deep into some of his data and review some at the same time. So Monty, why don't you tell me what you think about Jayden Daniels? Are you muted?
That's my bad. He's an interesting player, man.
Yeah.
You went through some of those like records and some of those stats there. He is a really good player this year, and he's been playing college football for a long time, and he's really developed every single year. He's gotten to be a better and better player, and it's really showing this year. And he is seemingly improving throughout this season too. Like we both watched the Florida State game, which was the opening game, and I wasn't overly impressed by that game. He played all right, but unfortunately we haven't had the all 22 to some of his more recent games, but we did watch some broadcast cut ups of that and try and watch through the full game that way, and he is definitely a different player than we've seen earlier season. You know, in this most recent game against Florida, he's probably the best he's been all year. He just
Yeah.
continues to get better and better. He's a really good player, and I want to start out with all the positives on him because like there definitely is a lot to like about him. Uh, he has a really smooth and quick, compact delivery. His arm I thought was good, maybe not great, but I thought he had good arm strength, definitely enough to like at the next level. But I think the main things that I really liked about him was two things. I mean, one, he is an incredibly efficient deep ball passer, like incredibly efficient. People who are watching this on YouTube, you can see right here, he has a 99.9 deep deep ball grade. So he is ridiculously efficient throwing 20 plus yards. He is awesome there. And he might not do that in the same ways like a Drake May or a Caleb Williams does, where when we went over them last week, you saw all of that was kind of towards the deep center because they can drive the hell out of a football and they kind of put them on ropes to there. While Jayden Daniels is more of like this touch, lofted balls that he kind of just puts with so much accuracy and just kind of drops into a bucket for these guys. Um, so that's something that's definitely a huge part of his game. Before we get into some of his other positives, what do you think about his deep game, Sal?
I think that's where he thrives. I mean, you see it, and it's really developed this year. And I think that's where he's kind of made his calling card is his deep ball passing. I mean, he's really. I mean, the numbers obviously bear it out, but when you just watch him week after week, he's just an assassin in the deep game. He's very comfortable dropping back and throwing with anticipation into the deep game. He trusts his receivers. Now he has very good receivers. He has two really top-notch receivers in Malik Neighbors, who's a projected first-round pick, and Brian Thomas Jr., who's a projected borderline for a second-round pick. Both guys who can threaten the deep half of the field, but he really does a great job of utilizing them. He throws with anticipation, throws these guys open. He just feels very comfortable throwing that deep ball. He has perfect arc on it. He places the ball very well. It's amazing. He seems more comfortable throwing the ball, 50 yards down the field than he does throwing the ball 5 yards down the field, which is something I think
It's
we have to get
totally
to.
true.
He looks a little off kilter when he's throwing like in the short area, but when he's throwing the deep ball, he's totally in command. Um, so I mean, I think that's really his calling card. I mean, it's worth mentioning, some of the data, and I'm sure you'll get into it a little bit more. But we talked about things like big time throws and turnover worthy plays, and I mean, I think you have it picked up over the yeah, excuse me, you have it on the screen over there. Um, might be worth going over some of these stats now. So adjusted completion percentage, we want in the high 70s. He's 78.6%, so he's solid
Yep.
there. His average depth of target is 10.4 yards. That's actually quite deep. That's good. That's 25th best in the FBS. His big time throw rate, again, that's sort of, the way PFF defines that is either balls that are thrown into tight windows or into difficult coverage or down or deep down the field. Basically trying to calculate again Sunday throws. I think that's the simplest way to think about it.
Yep.
You want, double digits are really rare, like to see anybody anywhere above double digits, but he's at 9.4%. I think that is the highest we've seen of these
Yep.
top prospects.
That's second in the country.
Yeah, I mean, big time throw of 9.4% is exceedingly high.
Yep.
His turnover worthy play rate, again, to remind you guys, we want around 2% or so. He's at 2.3%, so right in line. But when, that ratio of big time throw to turnover worthy play, that's really excellent. To be darn near 10% on the big time throws and just about 2% of the turnover worthy plays tells you he's taking shots and throwing difficult balls, and he's not turning the ball over a lot. That's an impressive ratio. And then his pressure to sack conversion rate is 21.1%, which again it's right where you kind of want it, right around 20%, with a time to throw of 2.89 seconds. So when you look at the advanced stats, he's kind of checking all the boxes, right? He's making big time throws, he's making Sunday throws, he's not turning over the ball a lot, he's not taking an excessive number of sacks, he's not holding on to the ball too long, and he's still producing explosive plays. And when you watch his game film, that translates into, like you mentioned, his deep ball accuracy, his deep ball touch. That's where he thrives. That's his game as a
It's insanely
passer.
accurate.
As a passer. And I think it's
Oh,
worthy of mentioning that. But why don't
yeah,
you tell me some more about this guy? Because there's more to him than just that passing game.
for sure. And I wanted to touch on a couple more stats that I have here that's specifically to his deep passing. So his yards per attempt passing is on deep, so 20 plus yard attempts. He has a 25.3 yards per attempt, which is number one in the country. So that's just insane. 25.3 yards per attempt on balls over 20 yards. And then he has an adjusted completion percentage on attempts over 20 yards of 71.7%. There has never been a player in college football history who has had an adjusted completion percentage over 70% on deep balls pass attempts. Never over 70. He's at 71.7. We'll see if he keeps that up and finishes the season with that record. But right now, that's a record set it in adjusted completion percentage. So Just absolutely crazy numbers with him deep. So yeah, that's what to love about him. He like I mentioned, it's more touch and accuracy where he succeeds there. Obviously, has really talented wide receivers that help with this as well. But unless that he has that ability to just drive these balls deep, which isn't a problem. It's just a different type of style. It's not that Josh Allen, Justin Herbert type of like necessarily style with those, but there's still a lot of people who've succeeded with that. Like, I know a comp that a lot of people use, and what actually a good kind of transition to a lot of people use the Lamar Jackson comp with Jayden Daniels, and sometimes as a thrower, I can see that has a lot of those like slot fade attempts where he's good at like layering on the field with his touch, and I think Jayden Daniels does do that really well and has good accuracy and touch, kind of like the intermediate to deep area of really putting touch and using accuracy with those balls. Sal, you and I talked about this. There's a lot of Jayden Daniels comps to Lamar Jackson. And we don't necessarily think that's the best comp from just because I think it's giving you a bad understanding of who he is as a runner. He is a fantastic runner. Don't get me wrong. He is an amazing athlete. I mean, his run versus Florida this week, according to RA Analytics, they track GPS based off the videos of how fast people run. He had a 21.8 mile per hour run on that. That's insanely fast. He is a ridiculous athlete who has incredible acceleration, but his running style is totally different than Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's a guy who I'm watching him on TV as we speak here, who is a guy who can buy time for himself, who can, really juke people out of their shoes and has this ridiculous lateral ability. To me, that's not as much Jayden Daniels. He's an athlete, so he does have some of that lateral ability, but he is a guy who, when he takes off, he's a straight up runner and he's just running speed, standing almost a straight up. It we talk about, it reminds us a little bit of as Giants fans, Daniel Jones has a little bit to him because he's just running straight and it's just straight line speed. Another comp that I mentioned to you was he's obviously not physically like this guy, but Anthony Richardson has a little bit of that. He's not like a super agile guy. I think that comes a little bit more of his size. He's obviously a totally different body frame than Jayden Daniels, but he's more of when you see him take off a lot. And I remember watching a lot in college. He stood straight up and he just took off, and his acceleration and speed showed up on film. And that's a little bit who I see when I watch it, just not as powerful. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think just transitioning as you did to the running part of the game, which is obviously a huge part of his game. I think this is worth noting. He is a true dual threat quarterback. He beats you with his arm, he beats you with his legs, and he stresses defenses. And I think that's sort of the mold of the modern NFL quarterback. You want that type of athlete who can basically keep the defense on their toes. We mentioned in the passing game where he thrives is on the deep ball and his touch, his accuracy, his efficiency. Before I go into the running, I do want to jump back to the passing a little bit there. These numbers are
Sure.
worthy of mentioning. His raw stats are just eye-opening. So in the deep game, he's 30 of 46 for 1,166 yards just in the plus 20 area, 17 touchdowns and no interceptions. That's just a bonkers number to see.
Yep.
Like when you're throwing the ball that far away, to have 17 touchdowns and not a single interception, 25 big time throws. That leads college football in the deep area, if I'm not mistaken. The 25 big time throws that are deep to one turnover worthy play deep. So he has a 52.1% big time throw percentage on the deep ball. 52.1% of his throws are considered big time throws in the deep ball, and he has only 2.1% of those being turnover worthy plays. So I just want to emphasize just how incredible his deep passing game is and how much of a weapon he has made it as a passer. This is the main reason he's getting so much love. The main reason as a passer, people are really, falling into the Jayden Daniels camp. As a runner, the Lamar Jackson comp, I understand why people make it because of the whole run pass combination at elite production levels. But
You
as
have
you
to account
mentioned,
for it.
you have to account for it. But as you mentioned, he doesn't run anything like Lamar Jackson. You watch him. We watched several game films on him, and he is absolutely a guy who the way he utilizes the run is he goes through his progressions in a limited manner. Like one thing a knock on him, I would say, is he doesn't read the entire field regularly. He
Mhm.
often will cut the field in half. I don't know if that's him or if that's coaching, but he'll go through 1 to 2 reads on the half field side, and he will hold the ball to try to look for the deep play for a split second. But once he decides it's not there, he's not running and scrambling to try to find a throwing lane. He's not resetting his feet or looking to throw. Once he's made the decision mentally that I'm running, he's running. That's it. The passing play is over, and then he becomes a runner. He has the speed to make that into a big play. But his running style, in my opinion, is very dangerous. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. Anthony Richardson is 6'4", 240 pounds.
Yeah.
240 pounds of pure yoked up muscle. Anthony Richardson can run right into you, and you're going to bounce off him, and he's just going to laugh. Jayden Daniels is going to run into somebody, and he looks like he's going to break in half like he's Devontae Smith. He takes some vicious hits when he runs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of rough to watch when he takes it. There was a play against Florida State where he literally decides to run the ball. I think he pulls it back on a zone read, and he tries to run right up the middle with the middle linebacker. Do you remember this play?
Is it the one where he tries like hurtling over the
Yes.
middle?
He tries hurdling the pile, and the linebacker just absolutely demolishes him. I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually painful to watch. Like, oh my God, like he let it. That's a middle linebacker in the
He has a lot
even
of
in college football,
confidence in his running ability.
and he gets just absolutely jolted backwards. There's play after play like that on film of him taking needless hits, big hits. This is where don't feel offended by this, for the people who love him, specifically you, Obed. Um, he runs more like Daniel Jones than he runs like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson doesn't run like that. Lamar Jackson jukes people, finds a lane, runs, picks up yardage, and he'll either run out of bounds without getting hit or he'll slide. But he's not going to. He's not typically going to take on head-on collision contact on a regular basis. He'll take on
Yep.
some contact, but he's also a stronger runner. Like he could take on contact, he still chooses not to. Jayden Daniels, I think, thinks he's about 50 pounds heavier than he is, and he takes
Yeah.
some monster sets. He gets away with it in college. At the NFL level, that would concern me. That is a concern I have with his running style in the NFL level. Like he's going to have to learn how to run out of bounds, or at the very minimum, learn how to slide. Because if he's going to take hits like that, I'd be worried about his health at his frame. So I think that's a significant concern. But as a runner, he's fast, he's athletic, he can be a real threat. I want to get into unless you have anything else to add here, I wanted to get into some of the other stuff I have on him in my notes. Um, let's talk about his mechanics a little bit. We talk about that for every player. So this guy has a nice, smooth delivery. He's got a quick throwing motion. He has good arm strength. I don't think he has elite arm strength, but he has good
Yep.
arm strength that he can spray the ball in the short intermediate area with pretty decent zip. And like I said, on the deep ball, he relies more on the sort of like that perfect looping arc that he throws. He throws a beautiful deep ball, but he's not throwing frozen ropes like some guys do. That's just not in his arsenal. Um, he throws with very good anticipation, especially in the deep area. I think
Agreed.
he can see his receivers getting close to stacking DBs, and he lets that ball go way before they've got separation. He throws them open. He stands strong in the pocket as he's doing that. He has a good clock. You can tell like he knows when he has to take off and run. He doesn't take a lot of needless sacks.
Mhm.
Um, and like I said, in the cons, he's not a passer when he runs. He's a runner when he runs. And while he can throw the ball from one hash to the other sideline, which is a trait you look for his accuracy really falls. You watch him on tape, and that's where I was saying, like, balls that are thrown like from the line behind the line of scrimmage to maybe like 10 yards down the field, he will spray the ball and miss receivers
Mhm.
way more than he will in the deep ball. So he's
Yeah.
not super accurate in that short and intermediate area, and that shows up in the data also. One thing I know you noticed it, I noticed it. He has a tendency to lock on his first read and
Yeah,
kind
that
of
was my
stay with
biggest
them a little.
worry.
Yeah, stay with them a little bit too long. Again, half field reader. I think he's trying to hit a home run, and he locks, and if he doesn't have it, he runs. And I think rather than flying through his progressions in a full field manner, that is a negative on him. Something that I think you can coach out of him in the NFL level, but I think it's worth mentioning because some of the guys we had in the top five already do that, where they actually
Yeah.
do full field reads. Um, that's kind of it. I mean, I don't want to sound like we're knocking the guy a lot. I think he has a couple things in his game that need improvement, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, he's a fine football player. He can throw a good deep ball. I think he has enough things in his arsenal as a passer where he can be successful at the next level. And when you complement that with his running ability, the starting NFL quarterback with, you know, if I have to place him somewhere at his peak, I think he's a guy who kind of flirts with like the top 10 in terms of his ability to
Mhm.
produce in terms of overall production and yardage, touchdowns, things like that. That's sort of my breakdown of Jayden Daniels. Like, but what are your thoughts on him as a player in total?
Sure. So, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of my thoughts on him. Like you said, my biggest concern when I was watching him on tape was just that it seemed like he got stuck on his first read a lot and was even if he wasn't stuck on his first read, he was stuck in like a half field read. And maybe, that could be a coaching thing. Maybe they
Right.
they said, "Hey, we're just going to break this down to be half field reads," like, and sometimes he had full field, but maybe that would just like they put a lot of plays that were just like, "Here's your half field read, play off of this." That might have been it but it was very often I would just see him for a long time, he'd be like looking to his right. He'd be looking and he'd be looking and he'd be looking. And either he makes a play, sometimes quick, sometimes he'd really wait it out and throw it, or as soon as he looked to his left, it's almost like he's taken off
Right.
because he would look to see quickly and then he'd go. And
Right.
I saw that a ton.
Yeah.
And, it concerns me one from like, does he have the ability to do that full field progression? Two, it's like it's not like you can't really look off like safeties or anything like that if you're just doing that half field progression. Like I saw a lot of safeties just drive as soon as right where he was looking right away. So that's some of my issues with them. That's definitely worries me the most from what I saw. Um you know, you mentioned it with his running ability where he is a good runner, and it is like kind of mentioned when he's running, it's not like he's running and pulling up at the line of scrimmage and throwing it. It's almost like those old like football video games where you had to click the button to turn your quarterback into a rusher and then you were rushing and you couldn't go back to passing. Well, that's like him. As soon as he makes a decision, like
It's over. Yeah.
he's a rusher now.
Yeah.
And even like you don't see him extend the play often as a runner. Like he really wants to win from the pocket, which is a good thing too. Like for somebody with his athleticism wanting to win from the pocket, like that's a good trait to have when you're trying to bring a guy over to the NFL. That translates well. And if you like you have the athleticism to ask him to do more, but the fact that you don't have to coach that out of him is probably a good thing. Um like you mentioned, he has a really good internal clock. So although like once he makes that decision to run, he's running. It's not like he's making that decision premature. He once Granted, I'd like him to kind of like read the other side of the field before he makes a decision to run, but he gave like the time to throw plenty of time to really let it develop on the routes he was reading before he takes off. Um, I'm trying to think what else I had here. I feel like I had a couple stats that I wanted to go. Oh, so hang on, I'm gonna jump over here to look at the graph here of where he throws in the field. You mentioned, you know, how successful he was deep. And if you notice, he layers it all over like the field, all over deep. He hits outside left, between the numbers, outside right. Like 11 attempts, 17 attempts, 18 attempts, 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. There's no other quarterback we looked at who had that type of success. And I think that kind of shows up partly what we were talking about with like a Drake May and a Caleb Williams, where they really attack between the numbers deep. And I think that came with their arm strength. And that was something where they could squeeze a ball in. Wow. Jayden Daniels just has this deep accuracy where he can put the ball wherever he wants, especially with this talent he has as wide receivers. Um, he puts it in that intermediate area, is very good there. One knock, not really a knock, but something to consider. Look at here with this behind the line of scrimmage middle here. You see this 36 for 36 behind the line of scrimmage between the numbers. One thing I noticed was a huge part of their offense is they'd run those sweeps that would go in front of the quarterback, and it would just be like a little toss to him type of thing.
Yeah,
So,
you can't do that in the NFL.
yeah, and it's 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's not a lot. He has a ton of other yards, but just like saying like that's really a run, and it's just getting counted as a pass. So
Yeah.
just something that I noticed, and then when I pulled up these numbers, I saw how like big that is. Like, I mean, that can just be like a little screen too. It's not all that, but it's a lot of that.
And I think
Um,
that's something in the NFL, like now with the new rule change, like you can do that play, but you can't use that as a zone read with and not hand the ball off with the
mhm.
receiver running in front of you, right? That's like a new rule. So it takes away the ability for the pass play on a play like that. So that I don't think it's a huge part of his game, but that is part of his game, is that kind of sort of like essentially like that jet sweep kind of motion, play. But what else did you have on this guy as a passer or just overall as a prospect?
I didn't have too much, man. I think we kind of nailed everything about him. I mean, I guess like I said, he could be more accurate in like that short to intermediate area. I don't think he's inaccurate by any means, but I certainly wouldn't use the word as like very accurate. Like he's probably like, average to above average in that area. Um, then yeah, man, I don't have too much. Oh, one thing, I wanted to call out buddy Brendan, he asked a question on Twitter, somebody from PFF who had the uh grades beyond their first read in PFF. So interesting enough that we had issues with him getting stuck on his first read, but it appears when he did go beyond his first read and maybe same side of the field, whatever it may be, he had an 85.1 PFF grade beyond his first read, which is ninth in the country. I have that number for a few of these guys, so we'll go through it, but that's a really good number. So maybe some projection to him being a full field like progression type quarterback in the NFL that shows that he's had some success doing that. So worth
Yeah, I think
mentioning there.
I think before we move on to the next person, it's worth sort of projecting out where Jayden Daniels likely fits in the NFL because he
Sure.
started the year sort of kind of at the peripheral edge of the radar of the top quarterbacks to watch, and he's worked his way into, like really climbing into the discussion of first round grade, which I personally think he's basically at this point earned.
Yeah.
From most evaluators are kind of layering on a first round grade on him, and many people have decided to move him all the way up to QB3 in the class. Specifically assuming if Shador Sanders does not declare that he would slide up to 3 ahead of guys like McCarthy and Penix and others. Um, and I think it's for all the reasons we mentioned. He's already got in his arsenal like this dual threat type game and a very good accurate deep ball, which again, I mean, if that's all you've got, that's still a pretty significant, you know, set of tools to bring to the NFL. I don't think he fits in every offense.
I agree.
I think, the half field read stuff, I just don't know what to make of it. I don't know if that's something that's a coaching point because it's how they want to run their offense or if it's something that they feel is necessary for him. My suspicion is if he comes into the NFL and goes into a situation where he is a year one starter, you likely will have to have a coach who's willing to let him live off that half field read type system, at least early on, to get his feet wet, and take advantage of his natural skills and tools. I have a hard time placing him. I really do. Like some of the other quarterbacks, I was very firmly like, yeah, this is where he fits. I don't know where Jayden Daniels fits.
Yeah.
It's tough. I think ideally you want a coaching staff. You almost want like Pat Shermer in the league, for this guy because it seems like he's a Pat Shermer perfect prospect. Like he's a guy who you can use going high to low reads and run, and a guy who can really be a good half field guy. I think he fits in a zone read system. Let's start there. I do think he can do well in a zone read system where he can be like a run pass option at quarterback. Is he ready to step in and be a starter on a team that has an ability to win right now? I think that part I'm not so sure about. And because of his age, is he somebody that a team that's rebuilding altogether really wants to take a swing on and say we're going to develop him? Still not sure. So to me, he's kind of a tweener. Like I think he's a good player. I
Mhm.
think he comes in and he can start for a lot of teams. I just don't know where he fits exactly. I know a lot of people view him as like a fit for the Giants. I can see that. I can see a guy like Brian Dable saying, "I can work with this kid with his skill set,
Yeah.
and make use of him." So maybe that is sort of a nice landing spot. But I do struggle. I've been racking my brain thinking about this for days. I cannot come up with like a perfect landing spot for Jayden Daniels. I'm not really sure where he fits, but he's a good football player, and I personally don't think he's QB3, but I think he's earned the right to be viewed as somebody who's in contention for a first round pick.
Yeah. So it's interesting, man. Like as much of all these good things we said about Jayden Daniels, and I think he has some you arguably elite traits, which is something you really look for in a quarterback. But I didn't necessarily think those elite traits were like something that I'm looking for projectable traits of the NFL. Not that deep throw ability isn't projectable. Absolutely is. It's not that like his running ability isn't projectable. It absolutely is. But like it's just all the things in between that's like 90% of the time as a quarterback. It's not that he was bad in those. It's just that's not what like there's such a huge difference between who he is with that deep ball and his running ability. He really lives. I wouldn't say even lives and dies. He really just lives in that area in college. Those are like the two things he totally dominates with, and that's how he wins. And you know, I'm thinking to the NFL, and I don't think there is a good fit for him because we'll go back to the Lamar Jackson comp for a second. Again, I don't think it's a good comp, but I think it's a good comp in the sense of when Lamar Jackson came to the league, there wasn't a good fit for Lamar Jackson. There wasn't anybody who could do what Lamar Jackson did. And what it took was the Ravens having to draft him with a plan and create an offense for Lamar Jackson. I think it's similar with Jayden
Yeah,
Daniels. If you're gonna draft
exactly.
Jayden Daniels, you have to draft him with a plan, and you have to tailor an offense to Jayden Daniels' strength. And there isn't like a quarterback, or it's not like an offense where I'd be like, "Yep, this guy is a fit right there." He is a weird mix between like a system quarterback, but with like high end abilities because he has to get put into a system that takes advantage of his skills. Like I don't think he's a guy who's a freelancer or anything like that. They need
He's
to play to his skills.
I agree. I think he's a guy that like you have to build an offense around. That's the bottom line. You just have to say, I got this guy. I'm going to build completely around him. I'm going to redesign the offense for him and let it work. Because I think you try to plug him into a pre-existing structure. I don't know if he fits very perfectly in a lot of pre-existing structures. So unique prospect.
I'll tell
Really good
you,
football player.
I'll tell you one spot I'd love him, not for like a fit offensively, just a spot in general. I'd love to see Antonio Pierce get that head coaching job in Vegas and he go reunite with him because he was a coach with him over at Arizona State.
Yeah.
And, I think his confidence and his leadership would be great in Vegas and what Antonio Pierce is trying to build over there. I think that would be a really cool fit, but you'd have to bring in an offensive coordinator who can kind of set things up for him.
But that's a good one because I think Antonio Pierce would not have like a preconceived structure. This is what my offense looks like. I think he would just take the player and say, I'm going to build around the player and I'm going to bring in the right coaches. I mean, in theory, he would bring in ahead of time, he'd bring in his coaches, but maybe tell his coaches, work with this guy, build an offense for this guy, and we're going to run our offense that way. Because I think that's a good kind of system. Because that's kind of what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. Um, I'm not the biggest Greg Roman fan, but to some extent,
Yeah.
early in his career, they crafted an offense that they thought was suited to his skill sets. I mean, and to be fair, he won an MVP in his second year doing that. So it did work. It just was a limited offensive style that didn't take advantage of all his full traits as a passer, which you're now seeing be developed better in the new system that he's in. But I mean, I think that's sort of it. I mean, I think Jayden Daniels is a great prospect right now. I think he's a leading candidate to win the Heisman Trophy. It's going to help his cause, and I see him landing. Gosh, I've seen him as high as I saw a mock today where he landed 11th, I think on a CBS Sports mock. That seems high. That really does
Yes,
seem high to me. But would it shock me if he landed around like that top 15? I guess not, because he's getting so much love. Personally, I view him as more of like a back end of round one, you know,
I
maybe
agree.
maybe like early round two, back end of round one kind of guy. As a quarterback, that's probably worthy of a back end of round one pick, but that's how I value him. But we'll see. We'll see if somebody values him more. I think this is going to be my preference.
Yep, and, I agree. That's right where I have him too, but I mentioned it to you earlier. Um, Brugler was talking about him on the Athletic pod, came out yesterday, I believe,
Hmm.
and he was basically saying, not as a player comparison, but, like, where he might go draft-wise. Like, look, Deshaun Watson was looked at as a late first rounder, early second rounder type guy for a lot of the draft process, and he rose up the board,
He won
and
12. Yeah,
yep, so who knows, man?
we'll see. He's a very intriguing prospect to see how this all plays out for. All right. Do you want to go up to the next quarterback prospect we got?
Yep, let's go to the
Uh,
next guy.
all right. So you're going to take this one, I believe. This is QB7 in our list.
Yep, so QB7, Bo Nix, big time college quarterback, been around for a long time and a big name in college football. He's playing over at Oregon. He's 6'2", 217 pounds, and he's in his fifth year. He was a four-star recruit. He was in the 2018 Elite 11. He was a finalist. He actually was there with Jayden Daniels. They both competed in that together. He transferred from Auburn, where he was the first true freshman starter at Auburn since 1946. His dad played at Auburn. And he's been starting college football for 5 years now. He has the most starts by a quarterback in NCAA history. He set that record this year. I mean, he'll probably hold that record for potentially ever because
Yeah.
because because of COVID, he set that record. And short of another global pandemic that allows somebody to get an extra year of starting, that's going to be the Bo Nix record. So, um, you know, I'll throw out, he also played baseball and basketball in high school, but here's some of his stats from 2022. Like, he had a really good year. He had a 71.9 completion percentage, not adjusted, just normal old completion percentage. 3,593 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, not 17. I'm sorry. 510 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, one fumble, an 86.9 PFF grade, a 79.2 passing grade, an 81.6 running grade, an 82.6 grade under pressure. Really, really good. So he has 88.2 of that is as a runner. So he's also just good at getting out as a runner. That's where a lot of that comes from. That's with a lot of these guys. Um, but interesting enough, he has a 70 PFF grade beyond his first read. So beyond his first read is only 70, and that's 45th in the country. That's the last out of like every guy we've talked about so far. So that's the other side of it, man. Those are that's kind of an overview, but why don't you talk a little bit more about what you thought of watching Bo Nix?
Bo Nix is a really interesting watch, because I think anybody who watches college football has been watching Bo Nix for a long time. He's been around forever. Um, he started his career at Auburn, as you mentioned, kind of Auburn family legacy. Starting as a freshman was hard for the kid. I think it put him into a lot of pressure, and he wasn't ready. And you saw him struggle those years at Auburn. He goes to Oregon, and he, much like Michael Penix Jr., he resurrects his career. To his credit, it can't be easy being viewed as sort of like Auburn royalty, starting as a freshman, failing, and then saying, I gotta leave here. This is because he probably grew up in a household that was like Auburn everything, right?
Yeah.
For him to get up and leave and say, I'm gonna go to Oregon, halfway across the country, to figure this out and relearn the game and make himself into a quarterback, I think that takes a lot. It's the same thing Michael Penix Jr. did. And he did it to his benefit. He's a different quarterback now. He was sort of
Totally.
he was a mess at Auburn, if you remember. He
Yep.
didn't know what the hell he was doing out there. It was turnover after turnover, terrible reads, bad decision making. He was not a good player. And he's the opposite of that now. When you watch him on film, we'll dive deeper into some of the numbers. You've already kind of outlined how impressive some of these numbers are. What you see on film in summary is just a very, very smart quarterback, a smart, efficient quarterback who does not put the ball in harm's way, and he moves the chains. Now, I have my notes here on him. So when you watch the film, you see a few things they stand out. He's a strong kid. He's got a good compact delivery. Again, I know, like kind of like Jayden Daniels, slightly different, mechanistically, but the same concept. He has a good mechanics, a good strong compact delivery, gets the ball out quick with a lot of zip. He has good arm talent, especially in the short and intermediate area. He can zip it, when he's throwing the ball
Mhm.
up to about 15 to 20 yards. Right? When he's throwing in that range, he's hitting tight window throws, he's zipping it. He looks like he's got a lot of velocity on that ball. He processes the game about as well as anybody in the class. And I think that's his
Great.
greatest strength, right? Like you see him, whereas Jayden Daniels, not that he wasn't a good processor, but I think he either by some sort of design was kind of a half field guy.
Mhm.
Bo Nix takes a snap and he's across the whole field, right? He's viewing the entire field. He's going through all his progressions and he's processing pre-snap, post-snap. He knows where his receivers are going. He knows where the defense is. He's very quick at making diagnoses with the ball in his hand, and he gets the ball out quickly. He's able to make that decision, analyze the field, and make a call very quickly. He gets the ball out quickly. And because of that, he doesn't get sacked a lot. He limits what the impact of pressure is on him because he's such a good processor. He throws with good anticipation on top of that. Like he processes quickly, he senses where the routes are going to break, and he gets the ball out quickly before those
Yep.
breaks happen. He's very good. Now, I should add, all of this is true, but where he excels in all of these things is in the short to intermediate area. That's the thing. Everything is right in front of him, not too far away, and specifically between the hash marks. Between the hash marks is where this guy lives. He goes through his full field reads, but where he wants to be, like when you watch his film, you know what you notice? Mesh crossers, mesh crossers. I mean,
Mhm.
all game long. And I
Green
think
quick hitter.
quick, quick, quick. And I think that's Oregon. Maybe that's just offensive design, but I think they knew what they had in him. They knew that this is where this guy excels. And they designed an offense where it was a lot of stuff over the middle. It was a lot of stuff in that short to intermediate area, but he's really outstanding in that area. They didn't ask him to push the ball down the field a ton, but he can push the ball down the field. And
Mhm.
he has very nice touch on a lot of deep balls. Like it's an impressive touch. But, you know, does he have the kind of arm that can consistently push the ball downfield with velocity into tight windows? No. We saw throws on film where some of his deep balls just they die. They die like an
Mhm.
Oregon duck. Like
Yeah.
they get up there and they hit something in the sky and they just fall. And there are limitations to his arm talent and his arm strength. Um, but there are some more pros. He's a good scrambler. I think, unlike Jayden Daniels, who when he starts running, Jayden Daniels is a runner, right? He hits the run switch, he's a runner. Bo Nix is a guy who runs to throw. He
Mhm.
scrambles out of pressure and he keeps his eyes
All the
down the
time.
field all the time. His head is always up. It's on a swivel, right? He breaks the pocket, he starts scrambling, and he has good athleticism. He can run, but he's looking to throw the ball. And he generally does throw the ball. Now, he doesn't throw it very far. You see him on those throw runs. He's looking for like a short crosser or something in the flat, but he wants to get the ball out. And he does a good job of getting the ball out when he's on the run. Um, and he can throw the ball off platform. Like he doesn't have to reset his feet when he does that. Like you see him, he's in full stride. He does not have to stop to throw the ball. He can actually get the ball out quickly. Again, he's not pushing the ball down the field a ton doing that, but I think he has very good insight into what his strengths are. He's an
Yep.
advanced passer in a different way than Michael Penix, but I think he's matured. He knows what he's good at, he knows what he's not good at, and he continuously maximizes what he is good at. And again, what he's good at is keeping that ball in front of him in the short to intermediate area, processing quickly, making quick decisions, and punishing defenses, which is sort of chipping away with those quick passes. What the cons I had on him, I mentioned some of these, right? He loses accuracy and strength when he's pushing the ball down the field. Um, he relies a lot on bootlegs. Like it's a lot like
Yep.
the Giants offense last year with Daniel Jones. Like think about the Chicago game,
It was
right? Bootleg after
very
bootleg.
much like our offense last year.
Right. You saw a lot of that on the Oregon tape where it's just like snap, bootleg, and there's just a ton of that. Is that a negative or a positive? I don't know, but he does a ton of it. Um, he does have a lot of one read throws, and I think that's true for a lot of players. It was a little bit more pronounced on his tape how often he was find the first read, get the ball out quick, and get it to him. Um, and because of that, like while the numbers, if you scout backwards on Bo Nix, or if you just analyze his advanced stats, and then you go back and look at his film, like you're expecting something pretty incredible on film, and from the advanced stats, which are really outstanding. And then you watch the film and you're like, wow, this is really boring.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like easy, quick stuff. Boom, boom, boom. It's very much like the Giants offense from last year. If you guys want to get a feel for it, it's more full field reads, but it's a lot of the same concepts, right? It's a lot of bootlegs, a lot of short area throws. It's a lot of misdirection, but it's one read, quick hit, one read, quick hit, a little bit of running. It's very, very efficient. And because of that, I think if you're viewing him through the lens of that production, in my mind, Bo Nix he's a system quarterback. I don't think
Yep.
he's a guy that can plug and play in any system. Um, you and I went back and forth on where we think he fits, what team specifically. But where we landed was a Shanahan tree system. You know, I think that he's a 49er. You think he's a Ram. But I think the idea is in a Shanahan system where they're creative with how they use the quarterback, they're not necessarily asking him to push the ball deep all the time. They want him to take the easy stuff underneath. They want him to be efficient. Bo Nix would thrive in this system. I think he would be an upgrade over Brock Purdy, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um, but that's sort of what I've got on Bo Nix, and I went through a lot, but I want to
Yeah.
hear what you saw and what your thoughts are.
So yeah, I mean, you definitely you touched on everything there. That he's a good player, but there's definitely things that I didn't necessarily love when I saw on tape when I was looking at the stats going into this, and when I watched him on Saturdays, I saw a lot of fun plays. I saw an offense that scored a lot of points. And then when you dive into it, he's a data darling, man. Those stats are incredible for Bo
Off the
Nix.
charts.
I
Off the
mean,
charts.
I'm gonna go through them here.
Mhm.
So we went through 2022. Let's go through 2023. Anybody who's watching and see him right here, but if you're listening, he has a 91.6 passing grade. He has a 90.9 intermediate grade. He has a 95.5 deep grade. He has a 91.2 grade under with no pressure and an 85.8 pressure grade. 85.8 pressure grade. That grade under pressure is better than most quarterbacks like without pressure. That's an insane grade. And to add some context to that a little bit, he also, granted, like this is just what he did under pressure, but he is the least pressured quarterback in the entire country. So that is not something he deals with often. I know the stat is only for when he's under pressure, so He is successful in the situation, but he's only pressured on 14.4% of his dropbacks. That is the
Mhm.
lowest in the entire country. He's only been sacked 4 times this year. They have a fantastic offensive line at Oregon. Their left tackle is going to be a very highly drafted next year. He is not eligible this year, but he's very good. And, you know, you look here is their average time to throw is only 2.41 seconds. That is getting the ball out insanely fast. That is 10th in the country. That is NFL fast, which is a good thing, but also, plays in more where he doesn't really get pressured.
That's fast in the NFL.
Yeah,
Like that would be like probably top 5 in the NFL in terms of time to throw, I think.
yeah, and in college, like says more around 3 seconds, and that's insane. Some of these other stats here, again, just some ridiculous stats here. His adjusted completion percentage is 85.2. That's insane. That would be the highest in NCAA history. That is just ridiculous production. Average up target is 111. That shows up on tape. Only 6.9. His big time throw rate is only 4.0, 72nd in the country. Again, that shows up on tape. That's some of the negatives. But his turnover worthy throw plays, 0.8%. 0.8 of the time. He has, which is first in the country. He does not put the ball in harm's ways. He is, 745 deep yards. That's a good thing. He has a great player there in Troy Franklin, who is a really good deep ball, really good with those deep balls, and he can put a lot of touch on those balls. Um, his pressure to sack conversion rate, 9.8. Really, really good number. Again, you want to see that underneath 20s, underneath 10. So insanely impressive numbers. So, this was something where going into this week of watching Bo Nix, I had high expectations for what I expected. When I watched him on Saturdays, I had fun watching him. I saw some really big plays. These numbers were impressive. I thought, look, I know this offense is a lot of like short plays, and that's okay. It's not necessarily about what you're being asked to do, it's about what you can do. And he was doing everything he could given those situations. But when I went through the tape, I just didn't see a quarterback that was capable of doing more than what he was being asked. He did a good job. He has no, let me take that back. He had a great job of working within that system. He delivers the ball on time with anticipation and accuracy, and he's able to buy time for himself and, create passes by being able to move around that pocket. But I did not see a quarterback that could drive the ball. There was one play specifically when I was watching Utah from 2022. He was throwing a screen to the field side. So it's a little bit further of a throw. And he was expecting to drive that ball in there. And that ball just died in the air. And those are like when when you have an NFL arm, you got to really drive that there and get that in there. And they just picked that thing off and it did not come with any zip. You know, he can work within the numbers extremely well. But when you get outside the numbers, the arm strength just doesn't seem to be there. And I thought he had more arm strength than he did, and I didn't see it when I was looking there. And he loses some accuracy outside the numbers, as you mentioned. Um, man, I don't think that he has a ton of upside, but what he brings is a floor. He may not have
Yeah.
a ceiling, but he may have the highest floor of any quarterback in this draft, which is definitely something to be commended. Like that is something to draft for. But as you mentioned, we both feel he's going to be best fit in a Shanahan type offense. My argument for the Rams, and that's more. Now, I agree with you with everything with the 49ers. I think it would be a fantastic fit. And I just think that there's some commitment to Brock Purdy there right now. And I think if he went over to the Rams, who I think are either going to be, if not moving on from Stafford next year, probably the year after that. And I think he could run that offense very, very well. I think he gives you enough ability to extend plays, but also just deliver exactly what you want from him. Like, he's not going to necessarily elevate the offense, but if you have an offense that you want him to run and you have a great offensive mind, he'll be able to run everything you ask him to with perfection. It's just being able to take that and take it to the next level that I don't think Bo Nix is necessarily capable of doing. So, although I really like him, I think that he is going to be very dependent on the system he's in. If he gets drafted by somebody who does not have a good offensive system for him, he's just a guy. He really is. He's a guy who will not put the ball in harm's way and will do his best to work within what he's being asked to do. But I think in the right system, you could see we made comps to the Alex Smiths of the world, the Brock
Yep.
Purdy's of the world. I think you know, he has some Derek Carr to his game. Like, he's a good quarterback, but he's not a great one.
Yep.
And Andy Dalton even maybe, but he I don't see a special quarterback.
Yeah. I agree. I think you nailed it. There's nothing wrong with Bo Nix. Like, there's just nothing. When you look at it, he's a complete product. I mean, there's not a lot of projection left. Hard to project out a guy who has more college starts than anybody in the history of college football. He's done everything he can to develop down
Yeah.
there, and when you look at his advanced stats, he's like in the 90th to 99 percentile in almost every passing grade. He does everything well, but like the numbers that stand out in a good way, the adjusted completion percentage rate of 85.2%, amazing. The turnover worthy rate of 0.8%, amazing. The pressure to sack conversion rate of only 9.8%, amazing. The one number that sticks out, though, that I think is worthy of paying attention to is his big time throw rate. The
Yep.
Sunday throw rate. Again, think
Yep.
of that as a Sunday throw, 4%. It's not impressive, and
Mm-hmm.
and it shows up on film, right? Like, he doesn't. There's nothing he does that's wow, there's no wow factor to his game in terms of
Yeah.
his like, other than his processing. If you appreciate
Which
the
is important.
cerebral aspects of the game, which we do and we should, he's got that down. And I think that's why I think he would be very successful in the right system. But is he going to beat you with elite arm talent? Absolutely not. So, system quarterback in the right system could be really good. Last two thoughts I have on Bo Nix. One, he's the guy that I can see like getting drafted to a team, taking over for a struggling veteran in his rookie year and coming in and just like looking really great, like just somebody who understands the game. He moves the ball down the field, throws a touchdown, looks solid, team rallies around him, and people are talking about him and they're saying, how did you guys all get this wrong? Bo Nix is so good, right? And then
Brock
over
Purdy
time,
effect.
exactly. And then after, several games, you're gonna be like, oh, I see why. Because there's just certain things he can't do. He's good, not great. The way I would describe his throws, did you ever play Little League baseball?
Yeah.
So when you pitch in Little League baseball, you remember this, right? When you throw your fastball, they say, don't throw it to the catcher, throw it through the catcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throw it to the backstop. And then there are some guys who throw it to the catcher who
Yeah.
can't. Bo Nix throws it to the catcher. He's not
Yeah.
he's not he's not driving it through the catcher to the backstop. He's throwing it to the catcher. Like, he's very, very accurate and efficient at getting the ball to its desired target. And as long as that target is not too far away, meaning not too far outside the numbers and not too deep down the field, he can drive it with efficiency, with accuracy. But if you're asking him to push the ball into tight windows with velocity down the field, like with some pop, that's where he's going to struggle. That's
Yes.
going to cause limitations in his game, and I think that's the best way to describe Bo Nix.
So
Um,
the
yeah,
last thing I had on him is it kind of goes in where you're saying where he might succeed as a rookie, and he's that kind of that Brock Purdy effect. I mean, I think there's two things that you looked at Brock Purdy where you're like, oh wow, that's why he succeeded. You see this with Bo Nix. I think this guy's gonna nail the S2 tests. I mean, he
yep,
is such a smart quarterback who is so quick at processing. I think he's going to be top percentile in that test.
yep,
And look, guys, let's not clown on how long he's been in college football and how many starts he has. You cannot undervalue how valuable those starts are, especially when you're drafting these guys not to be day one starters and not come in here. Like, these guys don't get the starting experience anymore once they're in NFL. They're going to sit in the bench and they're going to try to learn, but their starting experience is over until you put them in a game. A guy like Bo Nix, who's seen like the bullets flying this many times, been able to work through all the issues in his game and is at a place where he's comfortable with the player he is and like, he's a guy who can just come in, learn the system, and when he comes on the field, there's not going to be like, we really needed to get this guy experience. Like, he is going to be battle tested and ready when he comes onto the field. So I think that especially with these COVID year guys, you're going to get a lot of guys who have college experience, and I think that is a very valuable thing that evaluators don't talk about it enough. I think at the NFL level they do, but a lot of these draft analysts really don't nail home how important these experiences in college, especially for guys who aren't going to be day one starters.
All right. I think we got Bo Nix pretty well covered. Hopefully you guys have a better idea of who this guy is. You ready to move on to quarterback 8?
Yep. Let's go
All
ahead
right.
and do it. Introduce
So
him.
before we introduce quarterback 8, I want to point out that these quarterbacks are kind of broken into categories, not necessarily by some selection process, but 6 and 7 in our minds, these are NFL starters. And like right now, these guys are draftable starting quarterbacks in the NFL. I think it's fair to say that, to add to the top 5 guys, right? Then there's a line. And I feel like the dividing line is after Bo Nix in our minds, in terms
Yep.
of where you go from NFL starters. That's 7 NFL starters. That's a lot, right? Like, for a class. In our opinion, those are 7 NFL starters. Quarterbacks 8, quarterback 8, what do we are? 6, 7, 8, and 9 are guys who we feel are not NFL starters right now, but guys who are potentially better players than quarterback 6 and 7 with projection, much higher upside guys. So that's going to be our 8 and 9. So let's start with number 8. Many of you are aware of who number 8 is. Hopefully you should be aware of who he is. It's Quinn Ewers from Texas. 6'2", 195 pounds. He's a third-year player. He was a 5-star recruit. He wasn't just a 5-star recruit. He was the number 1 recruit by 24/7 Sports in America out of South Lakes, Texas. He initially committed to Ohio State, went there for 1 year, and transferred to Texas after that. In 2021, he was an Elite 11 finalist. He played baseball. He played football in high school. He was offered a football scholarship at the age of 11 as a 6th grader. That's how talented an athlete he was.
Yep.
He left high school a year early to go to college. In 2022 at Texas, he put up 2,177 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He had 52 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. He did fumble the ball 5 times. He had a 72.4 PFF grade, 70.9 passing grade, 59 rushing grade, 43.1 grade under pressure, and a 71.8 PFF grade beyond the first read. He was hurt for some of those games, but those are his stats. And let's hear what you got to tell us about Quinn Ewers, Monty.
Quinn Ewers he is a prospect that is polarizing, and you feel like you get a different guy every single time you turn on a game. If Quinn Ewers got to play Alabama every single week, he'd probably be the first pick in this draft because
Be a Hall of Famer.
yeah, 2 years in a row, he has been dominant versus Alabama. I mean, people who are watching on YouTube, you can see his grades here, between mostly in the 70s, and then there's that 90.3 against Alabama, a powerhouse football school, and he just has their number.
With several draftable players on defense.
Yep. Two draftable corners, like one of the best cornerback in the country according to our rankings. Like,
2 draftable corners, the one who might be the best in the country, 2 draftable edge rushers, including potentially the top edge rusher in the country, draftable linebackers. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah,
Not to mention he did the same thing last year with Will Anderson and Dallas
Dallas,
Turner, who's going to be.
right?
That's great. He is absolutely dominates them. Those games cannot be understated how impressive they were, and those are a big part of his evaluation. So this is the thing about Quinn Ewers. You went over how highly regarded he was as a prospect. I mean, he had a perfect like 1,247 composite grade, perfect grade. It was the highest graded prospect or recruit ever, at least tied ever in their system. He has one of the most talented arms I have ever seen. I mean, I was talking to you about earlier between like the strength and the arm talent. It's almost like a mix between Drake May and Caleb in some senses. Like Caleb has all those like arm angles just seems to have this deep bag of all these types of throws that he's capable of making. Like he has that, but he also has that like elite power that Drake May has. Like, so it's funny, and we're sitting here and now we're talking about this guy this late, despite that type of arm talent. I mean, I could go on where he throws with elite anticipation. Like I see times where he is absolutely throwing these guys before they even make their break. Like constantly, I've seen that. He has a quick release. I feel when he's moving around his pocket, he's always keeping his eyes downfield, and he's not a bad athlete by any means. But the issue is that there is no consistency to this guy's game. None. I mean, when he misses, he can miss a guy by like 10 yards. I mean, you and I were talking, Sal, where we both watched that Oklahoma game, and I came away from it like, oh, that was a pretty good game, and you came away like, this game's awful. And
Yeah.
one of our points on this was like, I was like you brought up an interception, and I was like, I think he was just trying to throw it away, and it just ended like he was just because he's in the pocket. So a lot of times when he throws the ball away, he doesn't roll outside the box and get it away. He has to avoid getting intentional grounding, so he'll try to throw it in the area. It's kind of what you have to do, and he'll do that a lot. But he has such sporadic accuracy that it's hard to judge this guy, because like, did this guy miss his receiver by 15 yards, or was he trying to down the ball? Like, it's hard to tell.
He's so frustrating to watch, man. Like, so the name of the game in describing Quinn Ewers is just inconsistent. It's Jekyll and Hyde within the same game. Like the play I'm referring to is that Oklahoma game, which I agree with you. Like there were points in that game where he was making incredible throws. Like I know what you're talking about. Like he was throwing guys open, hitting the deep ball, hitting home runs. This was in fact, what I'm talking about was the 2022 Red River game. That game where they blew out Oklahoma. To be fair, like they dominated Oklahoma in that game. Texas did, and he had a good game. But there were throws in that game where you're like, what the hell is he doing? And the one in particular was he was in the pocket, he was pressured, but not that much. And I think he was trying to throw the ball away, but he just threw the ball. I mean, this is a guy who could throw it on a frozen rope like 60 yards, and he threw a duck straight into the air.
Yeah.
Do you remember the play I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He threw a duck straight into the air as if he was trying to throw it into the stands, and it landed like at the 20-yard line, 10 feet in. Yeah, he punted it like 10 feet inside from the sideline. The cornerback is just standing there. He couldn't believe the ball was coming at him. And there's nobody around him. He just catches it. And he just starts running. And it's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what? Like, there was no reason to do any of that. So it's frustrating because those kinds of mistakes are backbreakers. You lose football games with plays like that. And he makes them. And it's not just that play. Like, he makes throws like that. There are times where he throws the ball away, where he's clearly trying to throw the ball, but when he throws the ball away inbounds in traffic for no reason, like, what? I don't understand what he's doing. Like, he's in traffic, he'll just throw the ball away,
Yeah.
And like when he could easily just gun it out of bounds if he really wants to, right? Um, and he does throw the ball away a lot. But it's something
Yeah.
you mentioned. Like he has a tendency to not, even though he has the arm to beat tight coverage, he has that kind of arm. He just decides he gives up on plays and he'll just throw the ball away. He'll go through like throwing the ball away frenzies. You'll see play after play where he's just chucking the ball away. Um, when he misses, like you said, it doesn't. I don't even know where the hell he was going with the ball. It's so bad sometimes. Like I'm not
It
sure
looks like
who
it's
he was trying to go.
throwaways where I
Yeah,
can't tell the difference. They're 10 yards over their head.
his good is as good as anybody in the class because he has an elite arm.
Mhm.
His bad is like a blooper reel bad. It's awful. It is some of the worst I've ever seen. I don't know what the hell this guy's problem is. I don't know if he needs coaching or a sports psychologist, but there's
Yeah.
something wrong with Quinn Ewers right now. He's not NFL ready. Not by a
No.
long shot right now. He now let's be fair to him. He has incredible talent. You can't teach what he has, right? That arm is special. He has a special arm. Now he has a I don't recall if you mentioned this, but he has a funky delivery. His throwing mechanics they're strange. Like we talked about on the last episode, Michael Penix has that weird throwing motion that that kind of comes from his baseball background, where he has sort of that three quarters delivery, and he generates torque with it. Um, Quinn Ewers has a bizarre delivery, and the difference is Michael Penix Jr. is consistent with his delivery. He's consistently throwing
Mhm.
the ball a certain way with a certain velocity with accuracy. Quinn Ewers' delivery is not only bizarre in its throwing style, but his feet are all over the place. It's not consistent. Sometimes he's throwing the ball 100 miles an hour. Sometimes it looks like a dead duck. There are a lot of mechanical issues with him that I think need to be fixed, and I don't know
Yeah.
if they can be fixed. Right? Like I'm not sure
Mhm.
they can be. There's a lot there, a lot of talent that you can work with, but there's a lot of work that has to go to fixing that talent, and it's troubling that he's in his 3rd year now. I think it's his 3rd year starting.
Second year starting.
So I'm sorry. Okay, so his 2nd year starting, and you're not seeing progress in
Yeah.
these things, right? That's the concerning part. Right? You're not seeing these things. He's the same mistakes he was making in the beginning of last year. He's still doing that now. Um, Now, to be fair to Quinn Ewers, some of the guys that we have ahead of him on this list had the exact same problems when they were in their 2nd year starting, and they were his
Yeah,
age.
I've been thinking the same thing. Like
And
the
and
like if you're looking at these grades, 72.4, 81.1, we've seen a lot of these guys we've covered who make that jump in that next year.
right. So it's possible that he just makes a jump. It's possible he transfers somewhere and gets his act together and has a reset, and kind of gets his mind right. And maybe just the experience of being in college for a certain amount of time and playing, he just starts putting it together, which is the theme of this draft class, right? Guys who stayed a little bit longer, took advantage of the COVID year, and put it together. In my mind, Quinn Ewers is a guy that if he does declare, he's definitely going to be drafted, right? He's too talented not to draft.
Yeah, I think it probably goes Brown too.
Could go round 2, maybe round 3, but
Mhm.
somewhere on day 2, I think. But you're spending a pick on a guy, and you cannot play Quinn Ewers year 1. Like
Yeah.
you stash him. You can't put him on your practice squad because somebody will take him. But
Yeah.
basically, he's sitting in he's QB3 on your team, right?
Mhm.
And he's sitting behind your quarterback and your backup quarterback, and his job the whole year is to do nothing but work on his mechanics with a good quarterback coach and to learn the NFL and practice, and you hope by year 2 this guy can get on the NFL field and put it together. That's if he declares. I think the most likely thing is that Quinn Ewers strongly considers going back to college, and we don't know. There have been stories this week he may go back to college,
Yeah,
he
we
may
should
not go back
talk
to
about
college.
that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a report that came out that he was 90% to go back to Texas. Then a report came out a few days later that, oh, it's not even close to a sure thing. Like, he's not sure what he's doing
Yeah,
because he just had a really good game.
Peter Thamel or whatever, the ESPN college football analyst, he said It's considering it, like, but it's not even close to a done deal. So that's
And
why
I
we're talking about it.
Right. And I think when you hear stories like that, the player is probably thinking, if I finish strong, especially if I finish strong in a bowl game, like he'll play in a bowl game. I'm pretty sure he will. I don't think he has the ability not to play in a bowl game.
Yeah,
I don't
I
think he's
agree.
put enough. I don't think he's put enough on tape to skip a bowl game. If he plays really well down the stretch and he plays well in a bowl game, everybody knows his name. They know his talent. They know the recruit he was. If he looks like he's putting it together, his stock rises because he goes to the combine, and this is the guy he's gonna test pretty well, but he's gonna be the guy who's throwing like those insane throws in the combine, and his stock will just keep going up and up and up. And he'll go to the Senior Bowl and he'll probably do well there. Like this is a guy that his stock after the season can absolutely rise because everybody has this preconceived bias of how talented he is, which is real. So I think that's why he hasn't made his mind up. That like
Yep.
I think he wants to see how he finishes. But even if he is drafted, I feel very strongly that Quinn Ewers is a super high upside prospect, but he needs to sit. He is not ready to play in the NFL next year. But I'll leave it at that. What are the thoughts you have on Quinn Ewers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the best thing for him, like you said, is for him to go back to school. I mean, if we were in a situation where Daniel Jones played a good year, but we still feel like we need a quarterback upgrade at some point, I think I'd be advocating for Quinn Ewers to, like, in the second round, let him sit and try to develop him with some really good, quarterback coaches that we have in this roster with, or on this staff with Brian Dable at the very least, potentially Mike Kafka. We'll see who's on the staff next year. But the thing is, I don't think we have that luxury. We have no idea what Daniel Jones is going to be next year. We have no idea when he's coming back from the knee injury. We don't know if his athleticism will be the same as we don't know what's happening with that neck injury. We can't just take a red shirt year. Right? We're not in that position. But I think regardless, Quinn Ewers should go back to school. You mentioned his mechanics. I think that is probably a big issue for a lot of this, sporadic behavior with or sporadic throws with him is that he has inconsistent mechanics and footwork, and that can lead to this inconsistency as a passer. Because when he's on, he is very accurate. It's just when
Right.
it's not like he's an inaccurate quarterback. Like when he's
No.
playing well, he can put it on. He can put it on the dot. He can put it right on the spot. But when he's not playing well, this is like the other thing you mentioned was like, does he need a coach or a psychologist? Because what happens is when he has a bad game, it tends
Oh.
to build on his mistakes. And if you go back and watch his Oklahoma State game from 2022, that was one of the games I watched.
Horrible.
It
It was
it
horrible.
it felt like it got worse and worse and worse and worse. And it got to the point where you just expected bad plays to happen. He'd just be fumbling a snap, and of course he fumbled the snap because he can't do anything right now. He is shook. He doesn't know what to do. Like it just got it just each play fed off the last, and he couldn't find a way to get out of it. He kept trying harder and harder to like make a big play to get him out, like get out of this funk that he was having and build some positive momentum, and he just couldn't find a way out of it. One
It's
thing I
worth
had. No,
Oh, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, it's worth mentioning that, like, that sporadic behavior is something that is occurring in the context of one of the top receiving cores in the country. Like, this guy
Yeah,
has a stable of draftable players that he's throwing to. It's not like he's got no help. You've got Xavier Worthy, who is a borderline first, second round pick. You've got Adonai Mitchell, who's right in that same category. You've got some underclassmen who are really outstanding. He has a great running back who would have been could potentially. He just unfortunately I think he would he have an ACL or some sort of injury this
something
week,
like that. Yeah,
where he's
you
unfortunately I
have
think he's out for the
Sanders, the
season.
tight end.
Right, I mean, that's right. He has Sanders. He has great targets. He just it's not got nothing to do with his surroundings. It's just him. When you look at his stats, Monty, 77.7% adjusted completion percentage. That's pretty solid, right? But
Yeah,
look at these
well,
numbers. Big time throw percent, 3.1%. For a guy with that arm, with that stable of horses to throw to,
inexcusable.
3.1%, that's inexcusably low. 1.7% turnover worthy like play rate. I don't even know how it's that low, to be perfectly honest. Like I thought it was gonna be
Throws the
higher.
ball away.
Right. I guess those don't count. But this number, listen to this. He only has an average time to throw of 2.55 seconds. That sounds really great, right? Like somebody who'll do a good
Yeah.
job getting the ball out. His pressure to sack conversion rate, 31%. That's Daniel Jones 2023 like numbers. Like that is awful. That pretty much every third time there's a pressure, this guy goes down with a sack and the drive basically dies. Some of this stuff is just inexcusably bad.
And something I want to mention to that with a 31% pressure to sack rate. I mentioned how Bo Nix is last in the country in drop back percentage he's pressured on. Quinn Ewers is third. He's only pressured on 20.5% of his dropbacks. And he's found a way to be
To get
sacked.
sacked.
So hear this. Bo Nix, 14.4% of his dropbacks. He's been sacked
Okay.
4 times. Quinn
Okay.
Ewers, 20.5, third least in the country. He's been sacked 17 times.
Yeah. It's bad. This
Yeah.
stuff, yeah, the data love Bo Nix. The data hates Quinn Ewers. Hey, it's red flags. It's like red alert screaming, don't draft me, or just go back to school and get this fixed. At the end of the day, you bank on traits, you bank on talent. And if he does decide to declare, he'll get drafted by somebody. But man, this guy needs work. I mean, he needs a lot of things to be fixed. But if this is the good part, if you can hone in on this guy's talent, if you can fix his mechanics, if you can get his mind right, because I do think there's a mental aspect to this stuff, and you get him focused, you get him on some Adderall, maybe I don't know, like you help this kid out, you might tap into a guy who has top 10 NFL talent as a quarterback. That's the
If not
upside. He
higher.
does, if not higher, he could be top 5 potentially. He's really got a talented arm. He's got a special arm, but he's got a lot of work to do. I think he's going to go back to school personally. Gun to my head, I think that's what I would suspect he's doing.
That's the
I've
rumors.
I've heard it is Texas that he's going to go back to, which is interesting,
Crazy.
which has implications for Arch Manning amongst other
Mhm.
people. Hearing rumors about Arch Manning also. I've heard a little birdie tell me that the most likely landing spot for Arch Manning might be LSU, which is something to watch.
Mhm.
But if he goes to Texas, fine. If he goes to transfer, you know, well, there's no more Pac-12, but I would have said go to the Pac-12 and figure it out. But this is a guy who needs to probably go back to school, and I think he has eligibility. He should go back and use that time to figure things out. If he goes to the NFL, are the Giants a good fit? The only way I can see him fitting on the Giants, Monty, is if it, it's a scenario I dread, but they decide they're rolling with Daniel Jones as quarterback 1 next year, and they're
Mhm.
saying screw it, we're doing that. But you also then have to get another veteran quarterback to be his backup
Yep.
and to be a mentor to this kid. So you have to carry 3 quarterbacks on your roster all year. Can't be Tommy DeVito. And maybe it's Tyrod Taylor, maybe it's a guy like Andy Dalton. I don't know. I have no idea who it would be. But it's somebody else, and you basically want to maybe you go and hire Davis Webb again, to fix this guy. But you got to mentor him for a year and see if you got something. So he's an interesting prospect, but is he a giant? I hope not.
Yeah.
That's how
I
I would put it.
I'll say I didn't have a prospect in this viewing that I had more excitement watching than I did Quinn Ewers. What the highs of Quinn Ewers was more exciting than anybody in this watching. He has true special top talent, and the highs are great. But I have a note here for like when I watched the Oklahoma State game, he legitimately looked undraftable. I would not draft the quarterback from the Oklahoma State game. So he needs to go back to school. I really do. I would, if he came out, it he's going to be interesting enough, and you got to have good coaches, and it really could pay off. But I mean, he could be the first pick in the draft next year if he goes back to school, and it wouldn't surprise me. He has that type of talent. He just he has some shit he needs to get fixed, man. Um, I'm just gonna pull up here to just take a look at the chart real quick. You know, he has some weird numbers here. I mean, like, there's just some parts of the field he ignores. Like, there is not there's so many spots that have like 11 or less attempts to it. And I know he got hurt. That's part of it, but he really just seems to attack the middle of the field. He doesn't try outside a lot. He has some stupid interceptions right in front of him here. I don't know, man. You can get a lot of information from some of these charts that we looked at. There's not a whole lot here with Quinn Ewers. It's just not, like you said, the data hates him. It really does. But he is a fun watch. He is somebody, you turn him that tape and you see why he's on this list.
Before we go to our next guy, I will give Quinn Ewers credit for one thing. Anybody who has sat down and watched like 4 games consecutively, coach's film without sound of any player will tell you that there are times where it is like dropping 7 ambience because you're like, you're really trying to stay awake, like watching some of these things, especially if you're doing it at the end of the day. You're like, oh man, I got to keep watching this because you're looking for subtle things, right? You're looking for subtle things, and you're watching it and you're watching it. And it's like 20 minutes of like this silent movie. I never had a boring moment watching Quinn Ewers because
it was good or bad.
Yeah, it was like, wow, I can't believe you do that. And then it was like, what the fuck is he doing? Like it was with full sound without sound. So
it was a nice breakup after Bo Nix.
Highly entertaining stuff. All right, you want to move on to QB9?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get to it. So our next here, our QB9. I think a guy who a lot of Giants fans know about. He seems to be a guy who's popular on Giants Twitter, and that's Cam Ward out of Washington State. 6'2", 223 pounds, so a pretty thickly built quarterback. He's in his 4th year. He was a 0-start recruit out of high school. 0 stars. He went to a card named Word. I don't even know how to say that, but
Incarnate Word.
Yeah, FCS or Division 2 or something.
It's an FCS school. Yeah.
Yeah, and he transferred over to Washington State with his offensive coordinator, and took a job over here as an OC. He was a 2-time district basketball MVP in high school. He has some NFL bloodlines. He has relations to NFL players Quandre Diggs and Quentin Jammer. His 2022 stats were 64.4 completion percentage, 3,232 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 58 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, 9 fumbles. Now, listen to this. A 59.9 PFF grade, a 58 passing grade, a 64.6 running grade, and a 28.1 grade under pressure. And it's funny with all of that, all of Giants Twitter was talking about this guy, and there's reasons for it. That highlight tape is something. And there's traits there. Why don't you talk a little bit more about Cam Ward?
Yeah, Cam Ward is a Just Bomb production product. Like his highlights are incredible. No, but let's talk about Cam Ward because I like Cam Ward. I think a lot of people do, and the reason people like Cam Ward, other than the fact that it's a little bit of an underdog story, is that like Quinn Ewers, he fits that mold of a projectable athlete, a projectable player that if molded correctly, he has the talent he has high-end talent. I mean, let's just call it for what it is. His talent is very, very projectable to a high-end player. Just hasn't done it yet. So physically, you mentioned he's kind of a stout, strong guy. He's a strong athlete. He has a big, strong frame. It shows up on film. He doesn't look small out there. Jayden Daniels he's 6'4", but he looks frail compared to some of the guys that are trying to take him down out there. Cam Ward is not like that. His delivery is good with good mechanics. Again, another quick, compact delivery guy. He has a big arm. He has a big arm. He has big time arm talent. When he throws the ball in the short area, he throws lasers like boom. Whether it's between the numbers, whether it's outside the numbers, he's zipping the ball with a lot of authority. He has unbelievable off script ability, which is something we do value, right? A guy when the pocket breaks down, he can scramble, he can run, but mainly he's not somebody who's looking to run. He's one of these guys. Something we value is when he breaks the pocket and he's off script, his eyes stay down the field. He's looking to hit a home run. He's looking for a play with his arm. So that's something
Yeah.
I appreciate about him.
I mean, look, he only
And
had 58 rushing yards last year. It just
right,
shows it.
he's not trying to run, even though he has the athletic ability and the speed to run. He chooses not to. He wants to be a passer, and I think that's a good trait. He's very accurate, as I mentioned, in the short area, in the intermediate area, and his accurate and kind of like Ewers, when he's on. He's on. Like he's accurate. He's zipping it. He's making Sunday throws. When he throws a deep ball, he has really nice loft. Like that's where I think he really excels on tape. When he throws that deep ball, he throws just a beautiful arc and drops it right between his receiver's hands. It's a pretty thing to watch when he's on. And he does go through progressions well. He goes through his reads quickly. You watch the tape and you see the good stuff from Cam Ward. He does all the things that I'm describing that you think you want to see in a high caliber NFL quarterback. Then there's the rest of the tape, and that's where the cons come in. He does hold the ball too long. He has a tendency to hold it, and even when he's holding it and going through those progressions, he has a very bad habit of just making the wrong decision. Like you
Mhm.
see it on tape. Like he'll have a receiver breaking open in the intermediate area. He should hit him in stride and just take the yardage, and he'll decide that he's going to force a ball into double and triple coverage, and he'll throw a pick or a turnover worthy play. He puts the ball in harm's way way too much, and in situations that just don't call for it. Like if you look at the game situations, he's doing this for no reason. He doesn't have to force these throws. He does it anyway. He does it enough where you start thinking it's more of a feature, not a bug of his game. It's just something he does. He fumbles a lot, and I think that also reflects he's holding on to the ball a lot. He gets hit, he fumbles. And I saw plays on tape. I don't know if you saw them where he has front side blitzes coming from from a safety or corner. He doesn't
I know it's
see
the
them.
same thing.
He doesn't see them. Like front
Yeah.
side, like I'm not talking about backside. I'm not like the guy's in like coming right at him, and he does not see the guy, and he just gets demolished. Like I don't know, like where the pocket awareness is on some of those plays. Is he so fixated on down the field that he has no clue what's going on around him? Because that's a little bit of a troubling trait, and it happened on more than one occasion. I saw it on several plays, and I think defense has picked up on it. Like, hey, this guy doesn't sense pressure very well, especially when it comes on these delayed blitzes, and he can't get himself out of the way for those because he doesn't even feel it. He's just mercurial. When he's on, he's incredible. When he's off, he's really, really bad. Um, Another guy that probably needs a lot of coaching, maybe another year to clean up his game. Comes to it's like Quinn Ewers. If he decides to declare his arm talent is significant enough where he's going to get drafted. Now, I don't know where he's going to get drafted. I don't think he's going to be drafted the second round like Ewers might. I can see this guy easily slipping to day 3. In fact, I think he
Yep.
would.
I could see it too.
But he's a guy that as this is a true developmental prospect, right? Talent is there. The upside is there. If you believe you have the right quarterback coach to just sit this guy for a year, mold him, maybe 2 years, sit him, mold him, teach him how to play the NFL game. He has the kind of NFL arm, athletic ability, running ability, processing ability where if he puts it together, you're talking about a really high caliber starter. So, in short, he's a lot like Quinn Ewers, you know, big time
Mhm.
talent, big time arm. Even though he was a 0-star recruit and Quinn Ewers is a top recruit in America, they're surprisingly similar in their trajectory right now.
Their
And
their
so
notes looked very similar.
it was their film looked very similar. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Cam
In some
Ward doesn't
senses.
throw up, yeah, like he doesn't throw up the ducks and he doesn't have like the weird mechanics, but in terms of decision making, very similar, right? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you playing this bad? The game, the game that stands out to me as like the extreme good was the Oregon State game. Did you watch that game this year?
Great game. Yep.
It felt like every play was perfect, right? He made the perfect read, he
So
made
much
the perfect throw.
confidence.
He completely, and that's a great defense. Oregon State's one of the
Hmm.
top defenses in the country, and he just shredded them like with just no problem. He shredded them. No, I don't remember the stats. I think he had over 400 yards passing in that game, a bunch of touchdowns. He absolutely destroyed a really good defense. But then he'll play games against other teams that are nowhere near that caliber, and he'll look like a high school kid out there. So
Yeah, he had 404 yards and 4 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions.
it was impressive to watch him in that game. And I think
Mhm.
for those of us who were sort of eyeing Cam Ward last year and saying this is a prospect worth keeping an eye on, that game, if I recall, came in the second or third week of the season
The
this year
the
against
4th week, but he,
the
you know,
fourth week.
they beat Wisconsin earlier in the season, and, like, they were having he was having a great start to the year,
Right.
and really he threw for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns versus North Colorado. I know it's not, but, like, the start of that season was like, okay, like, Cam Ward is here. He figured
And
it out.
and he capped it off with that Oregon State game where he absolutely just wrecked them. And
Mhm.
and then the rest of the season happened. I have
Yep.
no idea what happened. He just fell off a map after that. So I mean, I spent a lot of time on him. Tell me what your thoughts are on Cam Ward.
So he's a very intriguing prospect. I mean, I said that about a lot of these guys, but there's a lot of interesting quarterback prospects in this draft. He has he reminds me a lot of the type of things we talked about with like a Caleb Williams, like a Patrick Mahomes. Like he has those special things to his game where he creates for himself and has these crazy arm angles and these awesome throws off script. But he is just so much more raw than those guys. Like even college Patrick Mahomes, who everyone thought was raw, he looked like an NFL pro compared to Cam Ward. Like Cam Ward has such bad games out of nowhere, man. And to even like talk about it, it wasn't even like a total drop off. He had one game versus Oregon where he threw for 438 yards against Oregon. Like he's had some good games, but then he's had games like UCLA and Arizona where he's just been totally off. And you mentioned the fumbling is a huge issue. He has 13 fumbles on the season already.
That's insane.
Week week 1 versus Colorado State, he had a pretty good game overall. He had 4 fumbles in that game. Like the fumbling is a huge issue for him. Um, he, I really like him as a player though. Like what he does, to buy time and work off script is so impressive. I mean, you notice that this year it's gotten even better. Like last year, he would try to kind of run backwards and you use his ability to make somebody miss and throw off balance, make a throw. He steps up into the pocket and moves out and tries to like really like keep going forward when he's buying time. He's not just trying to like take off backwards and make a play. Like he's trying to always be moving upfield, and that wasn't something he did as much last year. Even with his off script ability, he's gotten better, and he said he always has his eyes downfield. When he is on, his accuracy is fantastic.
Right.
I mean,
It's keyhole accuracy.
yeah, he puts it on. I mean, you can see that with some of his advanced stats here. He has a 78.9 adjusted completion percentage. I mean, that's ninth in the country. That he is an accurate quarterback. It's just he is sometimes when he's a hot or cold QB, and when he gets cold, he misses the hell out of his receivers, and he feeds off this confidence. And uh the other aspect of it is just you mentioned, he just does stupid shit, man. He will just throw the ball into like triple coverage for no apparent reason. he needs to clean up those mistakes. Other things I liked about him, I felt he was another guy who added like really good loft and touch on his deep balls. You mentioned it. He has a really powerful arm. It's an NFL arm. It's not like Quinn Ewers level or anything like that, but it's an NFL arm. Yeah, man. You have anything else to say about him? I mean, he's an interesting guy, but
Yeah,
he needs more time, I think.
yeah. Ewers and Ward really piss me off.
Yeah.
Because they should be so much better than they show. Bo Nix,
Yeah.
the data loves Bo Nix. The data hates Quinn Ewers. The data is lukewarm on Cam Ward. It doesn't tell the whole story. You really have to dig into the data to match what you see on tape. That's good and bad. Like you mentioned, just the completion percentage. His pressure to sack rate is 24%, a little higher than you wanted, but it's nothing too crazy. His time to throw is actually not that bad. It's 2.81 seconds. Here are the 2 points of data from the advanced stats that tell the story of Cam Ward very well, in my opinion. His big time throw rate is only 3.8%, and his turnover worthy play rate is 3.7%. 1-to-1 big time throw to turnover worthy play rate is really bad.
That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, so for every Sunday throw he makes, he throws a ball worthy of a turnover. Just think about
Yep.
that.
That's
And
crazy.
that tells the story of Cam Ward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he shouldn't be like that, right? He should be a guy who's in the 7-8% big time throw area and down to 1-2% on the turnover worthy play rate. He's a guy who should not be struggling like this by throwing the ball into triple coverage. But when you watch the film, uh, to be honest, I think the data overestimates his ability a little bit compared to how he's produced this year. I think some of these numbers, like the adjusting completion percentage, are inflated by his reliance on the short passing game.
Yeah,
There's a
there's a lot of it.
lot of quick hitters, right? And he's good at that. Like he's got a good arm, and he's pretty accurate in that short game,
Mm-hmm.
and he moves the ball that way. And I think that's basically how he gets things done on that offense. That's not going to translate to the NFL, right? So for him to be somebody I have high confidence in at the NFL level, he's got to replicate that accuracy at least in the intermediate area where he's in the 70s, 80s. He's got to be able to keep those turnovers down to 1-2% while pushing the ball down the field more and produce more Sunday throws. You want that big time throw percentage rate a lot higher, at least like 6-7% for Cam Ward. He's got some ways to go on this. He's a bet on traits guy, much like Quinn Ewers. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the arm. If you want to bet on this guy, you bet on him and you stash him. But like I said, he's not close to being ready to start in the NFL. And there's a chance that whatever pick you use on him is a pick that you're just throwing away because he may never develop into that. Same as Quinn
Mm-hmm.
Ewers. So that's kind of all I've got. I don't know if you want to close it out with some of his data or whatever else you want to discuss on Cam Ward before we go to QB10.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you. I mean, he is a guy who's interested me in the past, and I think he's totally worth taking a shot on if he comes out this year, and he very well might. He should probably go back, but I think that he could get benefit from NFL coaching. So I wouldn't blame him if he came out. If we look at it, yeah, like last year, the data hated Cam Ward. We were talking about PFF grades in the 50s. This year,
Right.
it's better. 76.8 passing grade, 91.8 intermediate grade,
I'm not
90.6 deep grade.
and I'm not sure he's a better player this year. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird to me. I think he has better highs.
Yeah.
No pressure grade at 85.5 and a pressure grade of 51.7, which is not good at all. You look at,
Better than what he was last year.
yeah, I mean, he has three grades of 88 or better this year. So I
Yeah.
think he's really living off of 3 games where he looked like a true NFL player. And, that's something that maybe if he can continue to take the next step, and, those aren't just against bad competition, those are against some good teams, Oregon and Oregon State. Like,
Two
if
of the
he
better
can,
defenses in the country.
yeah, if he can do that more consistently, he could really rise up the board. He's a modern day quarterback. He's that that backyard quarterback style that people look for, that is Cam Ward. He has physical traits to match. We'll pull up the graph here a little bit to look at it. If we look at like his NFL ratings here, he's very good underneath 10 yards. I mean, he has over 100 passes in that between the numbers right here in the underneath 10 yards. That's kind of what we talked about. That's where a lot of that adjusted completion percentage comes from, where he works a lot underneath 10 yards, but he works a lot at beyond that as well. He has 53 passes with 129.6 NFL passing grade right there. But deep, he only has 15 attempts top left, 16 attempts deep between the numbers, and 12 attempts right. So he does not attack the deep area of the field that much. He as much as he is a fun quarterback, he's not necessarily a consistent gunslinger. When he's gunslinging, a lot of times it's stupid. Where he's impressive is buying time for himself and playing off script. Although he has a very good arm, he's not like the deep throw necessarily hasn't been his game, I would say.
Right. He's an interesting prospect. Again, if he decides he's coming out to understand that he's going to have low draft stock, and he's going to have to go somewhere where a good NFL quarterback coach takes him under his wing and mentors him and teaches him, and hopefully the product of that work is a high-end NFL quarterback, because he has that kind of talent. But man, does he need work. That's kind of all I got. If the Giants, like, again, we'll stop again there for a second. Top two guys in 6 through 10 were Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix, who we both feel are basically ready-made NFL starters. 8 and 9 are in the category of guys who are higher upside than 6 and 7, in my opinion, at least. And I think you would agree in terms of translatable talent, but are kind of a mess right now. And they're not necessarily ready to come in and start in the NFL, but they project as being higher talent level and need coaching, whether it's another year in college or at the NFL level. These are guys that you take to develop, truly developmental quarterbacks at the Giants. If they wanted to go that route, you could do a lot worse than Quinn Ewers and Cam Ward as developmental guys you grab and see what you can get. But I think with that, we should go to our final quarterback of our quarterback class. You want to do it and close this out?
Sure. So, like you said, two of my favorite developmental trait guys that we've talked about in recent history, but a lot of things to worry about those guys as well. So,
Yeah.
but we have our last guy here.
Yeah, let me introduce our final guy. This is QB10. So this ends our 4+ hour marathon of quarterback reviews with QB10. It's Jordan Travis from Florida State. He's 6'1", 212 pounds. He's a 6th-year player. He's been in college since I was in college. No, not that far. But, he's a 3-star recruit. Yeah, maybe since you. 3-star recruit. He was a transfer from Louisville. All of these guys are transfers, by the way. Every one of these guys we've discussed, they were transfers. His 2022 stats. He had 3,214 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 417 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, 7 fumbles. He had a 91.7 PFF grade, 90.1 passing grade, 79.8 rushing grade, and a 65.5 PFF grade under pressure with an 86 run grade. So, Monty, tell me what you like or don't like about Jordan Travis.
Jordan Travis, man. I mean, another guy that the data does love. I mean, you talked about that. He had a PFF grade over 90 last year. That's an elite grade. So that's the reason he's on this list. Despite him being a 6-year player, I looked. I just missed him. I graduated 2017. He started 2018. So
there you go.
Just missed him. But he's a solid player. He has a compact delivery, and he's good at getting that ball out fast and efficiently. He kind of has that, projectable, like, game manager type abilities there. He avoids sacks well, and he has pretty solid pocket presence. He has good athleticism. He definitely likes to use his athleticism a lot. It's a big part of his game, but I didn't feel like he had great athleticism, but it was good enough uh to work with for him. And when he was kind of working 15 yards in, I felt like he had really good accuracy. So as far as that goes, that stuff I did like about Jordan Travis's tape. But as I watched him, I there was more things that I was worried about than I liked with him. I kind of touched on it a little bit with what I liked about him, but beyond kind of that 15 yards, I did not like what I saw, and not really outside the numbers either. He does not have a very strong arm. Um, he doesn't really make a lot of big time throws. Um, I felt that what I was most worried about him was I felt he had very sloppy technique, and I saw that show up on his tape so often, and that's what really worries about me because, he is a highly productive quarterback who has a ton of NFL experience, who's been in college a long time. If he could come in and be a game manager, there's an argument where we could really start hyping this guy up to be that. And even if he didn't have high end traits, but like, hey, maybe he could be a system guy. The difference with him is I hated his technique and just how he looked in the pocket. That's what worried me, man. He just looked really sloppy when he was making passes on the run. He never looked comfortable in the pocket. His feet were never set. He was always just bouncing around and trying to move. He never just like sat in the pocket, observed the field, and made a throw from a set stance. He was always bouncing around and trying to move. Um, One thing I thought was really weird is he I can't tell you how many times I saw this guy roll out to the left. This is a righty quarterback. That is not a good thing to constantly be doing because he's constantly turning like his chest to downfield to make the throw because he's rolling out to the opposite side he should be rolling out to, and he's doing it constantly. I felt like he didn't have that good of a he wasn't that good of a processor. I I just really feel like as much as he is a good college quarterback and a quarter who does good things for Florida State, at the end of the day, he's a college quarterback. I think that the he is too old of a player to be stuck into these bad techniques and issues that he still works with and not to have any high end ability. I am out on Jordan Travis.
Yeah.
How did you feel about watching him?
I think it's important to mention that the reason we put Jordan Travis on our list is because you're going to see consensus reviews of Jordan Travis that put him right around here, like right
Mhm.
around QB 10, and it was worth mentioning, especially with his team being such a good team. They're very likely going to be in the college football playoff. You guys are going to see more of Jordan Travis. You're going to see him in the playoff in all likelihood, um, and you'll hear more about him. Scouts are maybe higher on him than I thought they would be. Not that they're saying he's a first round guy or anything, but they're saying that he's a solid day 2 guy. Um, in short, he's a game manager, like
Yeah.
you mentioned. I think at the end of the day, like his film is very boring to watch because what he does for the most part, snaps the ball. We can get into the details of his mechanics, but his job is to snap the ball and as quickly as possible to get it to Keon Coleman or to Johnny Wilson, like as quickly as possible, or hand the ball off to Trey Benson, right? I mean, so he's got to get the ball out of his hand quickly to his playmakers, and that's what he does very efficiently. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, to his credit. He's not a
Mhm.
turnover machine or anything like that. Um, he doesn't really try dangerous throws all that often. He sticks between the numbers in the short area, quick game. So he has, in some ways, he's sort of like Bo Nix, where he has good awareness of what he is and what he isn't, and he manages that very well. Doesn't have the same talent as Bo Nix, I would say. And his arm strength looks suspect in a lot of plays. like you mentioned, his mechanics are strange. He gets the ball out quick. He has a good short, compact delivery, but it's not the same as other people. He looks very herky jerky with his movement. When you watch him throw the
Yep.
ball,
Uh-huh.
there's he looks like he's out of cadence, right, from his feet up. Like there's something not right in the firing of the neurons that control his throw. Like it's a very
In the
like bizarre
double
motion.
clutch like that.
Yeah, there's just like a very like weird, almost.
Yeah.
It's just what's the word I'm looking for? Um, it'll come to me, but it just looks chaotic the way he throws the ball, and it's not pretty to watch. I'll put it that way. Does it matter? Here's where I think it matters. You mentioned his footwork is off. He doesn't ever have his feet set, and we also mentioned that he has a hard time driving the ball,
Mhm.
outside the numbers and deep. Part of me wonders, is that because his feet are never set, right? Like,
Yeah.
is he always throwing from a lack of platform, right? When he doesn't have to, like he's you got a good pocket, and his feet are always bouncing around. Is he just underwhelming his throws because he's not using his base? And is this the guy you can coach to have better footwork? I think that's the one thing that's projectable. I know there's not a lot projectable with this guy. That's the one thing that I wonder, like, could a good coach sit him down and say, your footwork is just a mess and it is hurting your ability to drive the ball. So set your damn feet, plant that back foot, work on it, calm yourself down, throw the ball. I wonder if he could generate more velocity on his throws and have more consistently with his throws. That's the one projectable thing I can think of. Other than something like that changing, I think he's a game manager. I think he's the kind of guy you draft, you develop him, you work on things like this, see if you got something. Odds are he's probably not going to really be a legitimate NFL starting quarterback. I think
Yeah.
that's the bottom line. Yeah.
And it's like I'm with you. Like, yeah, you could draft him and try to fix his footwork and all that, but we're talking about a 6-year player here who
Right.
doesn't have like elite traits. Like, I just don't see the point of it. Like, I mean, you people who are watching on YouTube, you can look over here of his grades in 2023, and it's just mid. It's just 70s every single game to like one low 80 and one high 60. Like, it's just 70s across the board. He is just a fine quarterback who is consistent. Look, Jordan Travis at the end of the day is a good college quarterback. He is
Mhm.
when you have wide receivers like Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. He puts good touch and accuracy on balls that he can put up for those guys to go up and get. He does a good job of doing that. He's a good job at like under 15 yards using good accuracy, and he uses pretty good zip in those areas. He between the numbers, he lets those guys be the stars. And Jordan Travis very well could lead Florida State to a national championship. But I at the end of the day, I don't see an NFL quarterback. That's simply it. He has a limited ceiling already from physical traits. He doesn't have an it factor or anything like that from what I can see. And he just has bad technique that you're gonna have to really work to fix. And there's so many good quarterbacks in this draft, so many more that we could be talking about. And look, I I didn't have any vendetta on Jordan Travis going into this. I thought, there's a reason he's on this top 10 list because when we put this together, he was high in a lot of lists and he has really good grades, really good stats, but
He's
he's
gonna
just
be here. Like, let's be real. Like, we're putting him here because I think that consensus views will have Jordan Travis in this territory of like a draftable day 2 to early day 3 type prospect. I think that's how people will view him. So it's worthy of our discussion. I just don't see it. Like, I'm with you. Very underwhelming film, very underwhelming production, solid college quarterback. Not a ton more than that. If he was 20 years old, I probably would be kind of excited about the possibilities. He's
yeah.
not, and
Mm,
and that's that. So I think that's kind of it with him. I would mention the last few points of data, like the data, like I said, it likes him. Doesn't love him, but it likes him. 72.8% adjusted completion percentage rate, 5.5% big time throw rate, 1.9% turnover worthy play rate. These are solid numbers. Pressure to sack rate of only 13.6%. That's really solid. It's really good. He doesn't take a ton of sacks, and his time to throw is 2.8 seconds. So 2.81 seconds. So again, just kind of solid all around. Nothing spectacular, and definitely nothing on film that pops as like this guy has any kind of special talent. I think at best he's a reliable game manager type in fill-in starts. Could he have a long NFL career being that guy? Potentially. I think potentially, but I don't think he's a guy who a franchise settles on and this is your long-term guy. I'd be very surprised at that.
I'll be honest, I'm at the point where I wouldn't even want him as backup. I really did not like what I see. I'll look up more. There'll be plenty of time to watch him in the playoffs. I'm assuming you'll see. From
You're gonna
what
see him get a chance to perform. Yeah.
from the 3 games I watched, I didn't see enough upside, and some stuff about his technique really threw me off for a 6-year player. One last thing I'll throw is some of the grades from this year: 84.6 passing grade, 83.8 intermediate grade, 91.7 deep grade. I think, you know, we talked about like a guy like Michael Penix, who his receivers help him, but he does as much to help those guys as they help him. That's
That's not
not the case with Jordan Travis.
yeah.
This number's high because he does put good touch on the ball and puts it up for those guys, but you have Keon Coleman, who is arguably the second best wide receiver in in the country. You have Johnny Wilson, who has a 7-foot wingspan, who can just come down with these balls. And then a 90.8 no pressure grade. When he's not being pressured, very efficient. 55.3 pressure grade. Those couldn't be any more polar opposite. Those are from elite to terrible. Like there is no in between. Um, I think that's just a good sign of a system quarterback. Uh, yeah, man. That's all I really have on him. I had a poo poo on somebody, I guess.
Let's recap it then. So again, going back to the very beginning of quarterbacks, 1 through 5, our top guys. Caleb Williams, number 1 from USC. North Carolina's Drake May, number 2. We had Shedeur Sanders from Colorado, 3. We had JJ McCarthy from Michigan, 4. And we had Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, 5. Every one of those guys, in our opinion, has a first-round grade,
Yep.
basically. They may not all go in the first round, but they all have, in our opinions, first-round grades, which is an impressive haul for a draft class. Quarterback 6 through 10 that we reviewed today. Number 6, Jayden Daniels from LSU. I think in our mind, he has a borderline first-round grade.
That's where
Really
I'd
good
have him.
player.
Yeah.
Number 7, Bo Nix from Oregon, also a borderline first-round grade.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit behind Daniels. Those are the 2 NFL-ready guys. Those are guys you draft and can easily go into a quarterback room and become the starters and be solid NFL starters within 1 to 2 years. Quarterbacks 8 and 9, respectively, are Quinn Ewers out of Texas and Cam Ward out of Washington State. High upside guys, lots of talent, lots of traits. Bet on the traits kind of guys. Developmental quarterbacks who are very, very far from being NFL starters. Need a lot of work. And quarterback 10 is Jordan Travis from Florida State, who is not a very projectable candidate, just kind of a solid game manager type. Not sure where he fits, but you're going to hear more about him. There were some names we left off the list, Monty. And, apologies. Yeah, I think worth mentioning these guys, because we're not going to do a deep dive into them. But 1T, I'm sorry. Sam Hartman did not quite make the cut. In retrospect, I think he could have slid into this 10 spot. It was close.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys who probably should have been in this 10th spot over him, but it's just where it comes down to. I mean, Sam Hartman, for me, doesn't necessarily have the arm strength, but he has all of the, from what I've seen, really good form, unlike Jordan Travis. Really good technique.
Yeah. DJ Ukulele is a guy that we originally had slotted for this, and I think worth mentioning and at least discussing for a minute. DJ Ukulele was a 5-star recruit, went to Clemson, backed up Trevor Lawrence, was supposed to take over for Trevor Lawrence. Things didn't work out after a couple of years there. Transfers to Oregon State, which is where he is now. What is he? 6'5", 250 pounds. He's a monster.
Something like that, yeah.
And he has the biggest arm in the class. The guy throws absolute rockets. He can throw the ball like 80 yards on a line.
Yeah, it legitimately was a video of him throwing 80 yards.
He was a mess at Clemson. Another one of these guys that went to the Pac-12, got his shit together, having a really, really good year. And I
Really solid.
don't want to get too excited because he's your guy. And I was laughing when you brought him up, and I don't want to give you too much credit, but he was your guy. Um, he's ascending like steadily, quietly through the process this year. I don't know if he's going to come out or if he's going to choose to go back to school. I'm not sure, but he's going to be noticed, right? And I think that's another guy like you bet he's going to fall into that Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, bet on the traits kind of thing, but with better production this year,
Yeah.
you know?
We'll have to look at the tape, but yeah, I mean, definitely better production. And look, if he comes out, you can bet your ass we'll do a player profile on him just
Absolutely.
because he's an interesting guy.
And a couple other guys, I'm not going to deep dive into them, but we should mention them. Michael Pratt out of Tulane, statue, doesn't move much, has an injury to his leg on top of that, but a very good passer. Riley Leonard out of Duke, who I did not want to mention at all.
Daniel Jones
Sta
2.0.
He's the newer model. He's the newer model. Um, Great runner and athlete, can't throw for shit. So he needs a lot of work. I think he's gonna
He
go
should
back
go
to
back
school
to school.
anyway.
He should.
Yeah, I think he will. And we'll
I think people projected his passing to take the next step, and it just didn't. He's a really good athlete, but he needs to be a better passer.
yeah. Um, and then you got a couple of other guys. You've got KJ Jefferson out of Arkansas.
Big dude. Tight end.
Big dude. He's going to be a tight end. And then you got Spencer Rattler. I think it's worth mentioning Spencer Rattler, who was once one of the top recruits in the country, went to Oklahoma, lost his job to Caleb Williams, famously transfers to USC. Um, Still not great decision making, but better. Putting together a quietly sound campaign at South Carolina, probably draftable. Um, so there are a lot of guys in this class. I mentioned them because one, they didn't make the cut of our top 10. Two, because we're just getting started, folks. We have now, with the conclusion of this episode, completed all 11 position groups. So we have gone through, and this episode's getting late. I don't care. It's late.
Mhm.
I'm going to keep going. Wide receivers, interior defensive line, edge rushers, off ball linebackers, interior offensive line, offensive tackles, tight ends, running backs, safeties, cornerbacks, quarterbacks. All in all, I want to say we've gone through something like close to 80 prospects, something like that.
Something like
And
that. Yeah.
so we're putting together a list of people that, it's a combination of summer scouting, what we've been seeing in the beginning of this year. We hope that you guys have enjoyed it. We hope that you not only watch it once, but as the draft approaches, you go back and you watch it again. But we're also going to update this stuff. Like, we're going to go through some players. We have more to do. We're out of position groups to review. So in the coming weeks, we have some cool stuff coming up. We'll keep you guys posted, but it'll be, a little hint. It'll be some combination of things like mock drafts, reviewing other position groups and players we missed. There's going to be a lot of stuff like that. Just keep the ball rolling as we head towards draft season. But that's kind of it for the player profiles for now. As always, we give you guys some games to watch. Monty, do you have any particular games you want to see this weekend?
It's not a great week of college football. Like last couple, we have had good weeks. I think the number one game to watch out for is Washington versus Oregon State.
For sure.
Number 5 team in the country versus number 11. Something we've talked about Oregon State a lot this episode. Oregon State has a very good defense, despite what Cam Ward did to them. We'll see what Michael Penix does versus them.
And
DJ
what
Ujulele.
Ujulele does against Washington. Yeah, it's actually
Yep.
an intriguing matchup. You got any
Like
other games on the docket there that you're interested in this weekend?
not a ton, man. I mean, as far as like ranked versus ranked, you have a classic Kansas for Kansas State, but I don't have a ton of NFL prospects to talk about in that game.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list and I'm like not intrigued by a lot of these games. I will say that the UNC Clemson game might be interesting to watch, simply
Sure,
because there are several draftable prospects that we've reviewed on both of those teams, even though they're not, top 10 teams. Obviously, you have Drake May on UNC. You also have Bryson Nesbitt, the tight end. You have
Tez
Tez
Walker.
Walker on defense.
Barrett Carter.
No,
Clemson.
on UNC.
Yeah.
Cedric Gray is it Cedric Gray,
Yeah.
the linebacker, and then obviously in Clemson you mentioned Barrett Carter, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Ruka Rororo,
Wiggins.
right, Andrew Wiggins. I'm sorry, Nate Wiggins, and then you have we didn't even go over some of the offensive prospects on the Clemson team, but mainly it's uh it's the kid Will Shipley, the running back, who I think
Yeah,
is a part of their offense. I think he was hurt. I don't know if he's still hurt or if he's playing, but there's some good prospects. So just from a prospect perspective, that's a good game to watch. And that might be the way to approach this weekend, other than the Washington Oregon game, which is a 7:30 game on Saturday night. Um, that's kind of it. That's an episode. That's our entire review of these prospects, quarterback and otherwise. Uh, Thank you again, guys, for all of your support. Thank you for yeah, it's been amazing. It's been a ride. The quarterback episode last week, the traction it's getting, we just can't thank you guys enough. If you want to follow us, as always, you can find us on Apple. You can find us on iTunes, on YouTube. You can reach out to us on Twitter. I'm Sal at Queens _ guy. You can find Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI 5TO, or you can just reach us at our Twitter handle at He's a Giant Pod spelled out. I think that's it. You got anything else, Monty?
That's it, man. We made it through all the groups. Thank you guys so much for your support. It was incredible. Said we're up over 6,000 views. We're approaching 300 subscribers. So please, keep telling your friends, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate all the support. We really do. But yeah, that's all we got for now, and we'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week. We'll have something cooking for you guys. You have a good one. Have a good night,
Giants.
guys. Go Giants.